Hello everyone, this is Shadow Dragon recording from the test server, and we're back on the stats revamp branch as they farmed out version 1.7. So this one has a pretty significant change. There are actually a lot of changes. Like there's a huge page listing everything, but I'm going to try to cover just the general things that affect every power. I'm not going to go into the power specifics because otherwise it's going to take too long. So I think one of the most important things, and it does address one of my major concerns with the revamp, is there's sort of a tighter control over the three playstyles, which we were kind of expecting. But it's definitely a lot cleaner now that we get a chance to look at it, because there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. So let's see, weapons are still the same, acrobat, movement mode is still the same, and I didn't really look at iconic powers. So this mainly deals with the stat points menu. So yeah, there's three columns now, whereas before it was sort of like three columns, but they had like a couple of items off to the side. I think they had like two things off to the left, and then they put the masteries at the bottom. But now we have the masteries at the top, and there are three of them, and they have the form verification where you could only pick one. So it's just a little bit more polished looking. So we have weapon mastery, and now there's a hybrid mastery and power mastery. So when you choose one of these, it's setting like a whole bunch of presets behind the scenes, mainly adjusting how power back happens. So with weapon mastery, you're going to get more power back from weapon strikes, and it also buffs the weapon attacks a bit more. And then with hybrid mastery, it's sort of in between, where power back is from weapon attacks, and there's some passive. And then for power mastery, this is basically the AM, where you get the power, the passive power regeneration, and almost nothing from weapons. So, looking at these three playstyles, I think what I'm going to end up doing is it will be hybrid mastery for the powers that I've been using like for a long time. This is going to be like my fire, ice, and sorcery. I'd probably throw in. I didn't test nature, but nature will probably get thrown into here because I was using that before AMs. And then for the powers that I learned after AMs, I'm going to go with power mastery. At least to begin with. If this went live today, that's what I'd do. Okay, so the menu is a bit more simplified. In the leftmost column, these are the damage items. You have the critical attack chance, the critical attack. Oh, okay, this is not moving right with the D-pad. Alright, switching to mouse. Okay, so critical attack chance, critical attack damage, and then you've got precision, and I guess they're grouping might and power together. So in a way you're selecting power still, but just not on its own. So that should make it less confusing, and there's a lot less room for error. Yeah, one of the major changes was we're not speccing into power alone. That was definitely a problem before, because like you sort of had to build each of the three playstyles manually, and that left like a ton of gray area between the three styles. And there was no guidance there. Like there was no guidance to tell you how much power you should be putting in there. At least from a UI perspective, there was no guidance. Like you would have had to read something on the forums. And then of course it'll vary depending on your total skill points. The middle column seems to be mostly healing related. You have the 2 percentage stats, and then you have restoration. And health is sort of like everything. All roles are going to use health. And then the rightmost column, you have the troller stuff. You have the power chance, power magnitude, and vit. And dominance is sort of troller tank. So it definitely looks more organized. The things missing, as I mentioned, was power. And you don't spec into defense anymore. So defense is going to happen probably along with roll and gear. So yeah, just taking away power and defense and making those behind the scenes like automatic, it definitely cuts down on a lot of variables and a lot of wrong builds. So yeah, this addresses the concern with this menu causing a lot of variation, especially for a new user who comes in and gets overwhelmed by like a menu that's not 3 columns basically, and that has a pretty high max value. Like the max value I think is still pretty high here, because if you figure like the really top players have 300 skill points, I'm not sure if they reached 350 yet, but like if you think about that amount, you're only going to be able to fill like 2 of these. So I really don't think these should be set that high at this time. Like just so this is less overwhelming, these should be lowered to like whatever the max skill points is, or whatever the max skill points will be, say like 6 months or 12 months in advance maybe. But this is like really high, 175 for each of these. And what you're seeing here is my fire character. So I picked hybrid, maxed out on the 2 percentages. And then as a start, I'm doing an even split between might and precision. And depending on how I observe myself long term, I might adjust these. But that's kind of a good place to start until you figure yourself out. Okay, so that was a very good change. Mastery stats I covered. So supercharges, yeah, the feedback there was supercharges weren't that great, and they really weren't, because like supercharge before built up really quickly. The supercharge move itself wasn't really that powerful. It felt almost like a regular move that was like maybe slightly stronger. So what they did was the supercharge regen happens more slowly, and then it'll hit harder. So it'll resemble what it is now, in a sense. Because I guess we were all used to that playstyle. We're not used to spamming it. Like, I guess we're being like more of a delayed gratification, where we're kind of saving up the superpower for that big hit on a boss fight. They did some role updates as well. So it seems like, let's see, heals were not big enough, so they probably increased the heals. They increased the power cost and throughput for basic heals. So I think what's happening now is we're kind of building our way to something similar to what we have on live, at least for support roles. And to tell you the truth, the support roles need a little bit less adjusting, because they're mostly okay on live. The disparity is the way damage is done, especially an AM user versus a non-AM user. And for tanks, they're trying to balance an active tanking versus turtle tanking. This one is going to be definitely a learning experience for me, because I don't know what I should be categorizing myself as, because like I do play fire mainly, but I think I'm more active than the average fire tank because I concentrate on countering. But how much countering constitutes active, we're just going to have to see that with experience. Let's see, they rebalance tank passives to account for moving defense from skill points to other places. And they made some adjustments to the fortified assault tactical mod. Block tactical mod for increased defense while blocking. Okay, so that was restored, because I think there wasn't as much of a buff when blocking before. And they increased the duration of shields. And since fire has a shield now, I don't have to ignore that. And for controllers, they got a group weapon buff that became more powerful. And then they adjusted the troller for the stat changes to power. So that's probably behind the scenes stuff. And then the rest, there are a lot of tooltip items. Changes to supercharge. And then the rest are power specific, which I'll get into when I actually do gameplay videos with the different powers. Okay, so I think what I'll do now is I'll go over some of the other concerns. Yeah, I think in order for this to be successful, a large part of this needs to be familiar with the current audience. Like it can't feel like a completely different game. And as I mentioned with the stats menu, the recent updates really help out. There's a lot of guidance here. Now I would like to see the same thing for the power menu. Or maybe not here because it's listed by level, like this is what you earn by level. But this is the menu that can be overwhelming because you just see a whole list of powers and they're not grouped in any way. So with these respec menus, what I'm looking at is possible combinations in the revamp versus what's on live. So on live, even though there's no flexibility, there's a ton more damage control than what you see here, because like we're limited with 15 power points, and then you're spending powers to get to certain powers. And also, in the old power trees, they had tiers where, like the lower tiers would give you a smaller damage modifier than a higher tier. And I think they were roughly grouped by power cost as well, like the lower tier ones would be cheaper. And then, of course, you had the supercharges that were outside of the tree, but were still like in the middle tier. So the old trees actually provide more guidance than this, because this you could pick any 6 now. So the chances of building something really weird are like much higher. And then when it comes to like balancing powers, you have to take that into consideration too. Like, I guess another way to think of it is if you have 100 players who are fire on live, there's going to be some level of similarity between some of those. Like you'll be able to group those players. But if you have 100 players with this revamp menu, and players of various levels and experiences, you're probably going to have 100 different builds. So I mean, I don't think they need to change the way this works. I like the flexibility of being able to choose all powers, but there should be some more guidance in the menu in the way that this menu is set up. So maybe they could go with a column thing, or they could draw rectangles, or have tiers maybe by power cost, group the supercharges together, that kind of thing. But I think any type of categorization is better than what we have now. Yeah, because right now you have like, yeah, the power costs are all over the place. Like you have a 100 next to a 400. Yeah, so I think something needs to be done with this menu from a user experience perspective. Okay, I think my other 2 points either will not be addressed or probably can't be addressed. But the other concern is basically that our characters have to feel roughly the same strength as they are on live. Because if you're used to a character like getting through certain instances, getting through a certain routine in a certain amount of time, that has to be able to replicate pretty closely on this build. Because if we feel significantly weaker, I think you're going to lose some users. It's going to feel, it'll definitely feel like a different game, because you're launching the same thing and then you're not able to get through it in a similar fashion. One of the main things about this is, I think if you look at my videos, like the more recent test videos, I started to feel more comfortable with many of the builds, especially with the latest changes with the masteries. Even though it wasn't refined before, like I did a small test with the hybrid and a small test with play from the tray, and they felt semi-comfortable in that sense. But the thing that still feels significantly different than live is the knockdowns. Like just going with same or similar builds to live, you're going to be knocking down a lot less. So that's going to take some adjusting. I know they initially wanted to take away like all the knockdowns, but there are still some that remain in like powers here and there, so it'll just take some testing to figure out which ones to use. If you're kind of playing, if your play style is to knock down, and mine is, because I feel like it's more strategic that way. So like you're kind of knocking down to set up something else. So like I feel like if we don't have that, then it's basically a primitive hack and slash game. If there are like no knockdowns, you might as well go back to the 8 or 16-bit days, where you're just taking turns hitting each other. So I think that concern is sort of at a neutral state, because like they took away the knockdowns from some powers, but some powers still have them. So I think for that one, we'll just have to see how the public reacts when this goes live, see if they're okay with it. And the other thing that probably can't be remedied, but it's still a risk. So I thought I'd mention it. Is we've never had an update like this across all powers, because when we moved from classic to AM, that was a very, very gradual process over like a 2-year period. And now all of a sudden we're yanking AMs and we're getting these new builds for every power. So I mean, there's obvious risk in that. But there's nothing that can be done about that one, because this is not something that can be released gradually, or else you'd pretty much have like a broken game for until they all updated. So that's kind of risky, but I think it's again they're just gonna have to go up with that and keep your fingers crossed and see how the users react. I mean, I guess a lot of these concerns would go away if they're, I guess if they like market tested, like a whole bunch of user profiles, like a, I don't know, like, there are a lot of different user profiles that I could think of for this game, just because it's been around for a while. So, I mean, you'd have to test anywhere from a player who's been around for beta to someone who's never seen the game. So that's definitely a lot of stuff in between. But if they did a lot of user testing and this revamp is the conclusion, then maybe it will be successful. Okay, I think that's it for now. I mainly wanted to just spend time with the stat points menu because I feel that's refined. It's probably close to finish. Like I'd be okay with that if that went live. And I think that's definitely the biggest highlight in this build. But in some upcoming videos, I'll go more in depth into the powers I'm testing. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.